Hello everyone, a very good afternoon to all of you. I am Priyanshi, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and Forestry Group to the first day of Vietnam Solar Week 2022. I hope you had a great time in networking with your peers today. We'll have those networking sessions again at the end of the panel discussions. We will be playing a sponsor video of our presenting partner Solar Edge Technologies.
PV systems, one rotten apple can spoil the whole barrel. By installing Solar Edge power optimizers that enable greater energy yield for the entire PV system, this is not an issue. Here's how it works. The power optimizer is connected via cables to each module in the solar array, maximizing energy production of each individual module. By constantly tracking each module's maximum power point, the power optimizer reduces potential power losses due to soiling, shading, aging, and current or future obstructions. SolarEdge's unique design flexibility lets you install modules of multiple tilts, orientations, and types in a single string, and even design strings of uneven lengths for easy module replacement or expansion. With the built-in Safe DC technology, you can provide maximum electrocution protection for emergency first responders and installers if the grid or inverter shuts down. And all power optimizers have a 25-year warranty, giving you full peace of mind. So why limit the energy production and revenue of your future PV projects? You made a great decision going solar. Now make it ideal with SolarEdge's power optimizers.
Now it's time to start with our conference. But before that, I take the pleasure to thank our partner for extending their immense support to organize our event, our presenting partner, Solar Edge Technologies. Now, let me quickly take you through today's agenda. We will be having two sessions today. Our first session will be on large scale utility solar, growth opportunity, finances, challenges, and market outlook. And after that, in our second session, you'll hear our expert panelists discuss the big tech trends shaping large scale solar. And now, without any further delay, let's begin with our first session. And the session we'll be starting with a knowledge presentation by Mr. Than Hai Nguyen from Baker and McKenzie, Vietnam. Welcome on the screen, sir. I request you to please share your screen.
Thank you, First View and Solar Portal for having me today. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Hải Nguyen, legal counsel on energy infrastructure practice at Baker McKenzie law firm in Vietnam. Um, uh, Today I'm going to speak about the current regulatory outlook for Vietnam, particularly on the solar market, and what will be the next step for Vietnam solar energy uh, in the current context of Vietnam. As you know that around the growth of Vietnam renewable energy markets, we all know that renewable energy, particularly solar and wind, have been developed rapidly in Vietnam in the past 2 3 years, and solar power projects attract significant investment for through Fit One Fit Two program. As we all know, a lot of solar farm and operating asset for and also rooftop solar. Right now, Vietnam have about 17 gigawatt installed capacity of operating asset, also solar farm and rooftop solar operation. Other than that, Vietnam also looking at greenfield investment for new projects. So far, we have been discussed this topic a lot since 2020. As you know that most of the solar farm are based in the previously approved project from the PDP 735. in late 2020, we used to talk about certain floating solar project approved in the PDP 7 divide back in December 2020 or 26 around of the solar farm approved in the PDP 7 divide back in November 2020. And a lot of discussion so far on the PDPA, the new master planning development. As you know, that earlier this week, the government of Vietnam had some internal discussion correspondent to clarify the status of most of these greenfield investment solar farm in Vietnam to consider upcoming mechanism for Vietnam. In the next 15 minutes or so, I will be updating everyone about some of the key regulation we are waiting for now. First is the solar energy role in the draft National Power Development Plan number 8. Then speaking about two main mechanisms for solar farm. One is the renewable transition bid to phase mechanism. First is the renewable corporate direct PPA pilot program. In terms of the PDPAs, the National Power Development Plan number 8, basically, as we all know, for solar farm to be developed, they need to be compliant with the development master plan at the national and local level. At the national level, currently we have PDP 7 revised, but going forward, there would be a new PDP 8. The MYT, the government of Vietnam, are in the process to finalizing the PDPAs. The MYT is clarified to submit to Prime Minister for the review government agency for the meeting to conclude the PDPAs. Recently, as we know that the Prime Minister also made some comment earlier this month and provide some comment on the draft PDPAs submitted by the MYT. Basically, the government want to clarify certain areas, including the feasibility of the overall PDPA, compliant with the earlier adopted Politburo Resolution 55, and also how to consider COP26 commitment and other new recent development. Obviously, the government of Vietnam trying to finalize the PDPA as soon as possible, but it depends on further clarification from the MOIT and including meeting at the government. So right now the draft is still in the draft form and yet to be signed by the Prime Minister. In terms of total capacity, this slide basically showing the capacity in the current draft. So in the current draft, the MIT proposed for the installed capacity for all sources in the energy mix, including solar. As you can see here, there is some area they are clarified, confirmed, conclude now is they know new solar capacity currently proposed in the PDPAs until 2030. But after 2030, there would continue to be a dramatic increase in the installed capacity of solar power. As you can see, only in 15 years from 2030 to 2045, and the total capacity of solar will be increased about 4.5 to 6 times, with the additional capacity from 58 gigawatt to 80 gigawatt. As I mentioned earlier, the Prime Minister recently had a deeper review of the draft and the proposal from MOIT and made some comment on the draft. Under the latest we prepare PDPAs, the implementation schedule for about 6.2 gigawatt solar farm that I just mentioned earlier, put in the PDP7 revise. You need to be consider review in terms of development phase, whether or not they need to be carried out after 2030 or they can develop. This is a question is still waiting for final conclusion. But we can see that there's some distinction between two main group of projects. One group is the project for which the investor had been selected. Basically, the investment approval had been determined. Basically, the developer have been confirmed by obtaining investment approval, 1.9 gigawatt. Another group of investor of project would be 4.1 gigawatt of the project only have a master plan approval in PDP 7 revive, but the investment had yet to be confirmed. Investor had not been selected under the investment law. So they would need to have a more clarity on how to deal with those two key groups. As you can see from the recent draft, there's some certain provision distinguish the policy and the strategy for each type of group of project. One of the key points other than that is under the comment from the Prime Minister in terms of the capacity for solar farm. The Prime Minister also consider whether or not the delay on the solar farm development will consider and comply with the policy of the Politburo, given that the policy of Vietnam is to encourage and promote renewable energy as a key principle. The second one is whether or not they're consistent with the current trend in the world when we're talking about the projected reduction of solar pricing in the market, and also the enhanced technology for integrated solar PV technology in the more reasonable cost. So based on the wording of the Prime Minister, it's not very clear about the final conclusion, at least in the wording. And going forward, the government need to make a call and consider whether to develop this kind of project or how to approve the relevant mechanism. And the government need to consider the rationale to make a final decision. One of the good side for solar power right now, as you can see, is the on-site self-consumption model, because the PPA still have an emphasis about the on-site rooftop, on-site project, not just rooftop but on-site project. Under the PDPAs, they rely for solar investor to develop on-site solar project for self-consumption, not connect to event grid or basically serving for the production in the new form energy, whether green hydrogen or ammonia. And the capacity of project in this case will not be limited in the PDPA, not subject to the limitation on the energy mix, and also the project can be considered to be supplemented in the master plan when there is some feasible proposal based on the current law Vietnam. And the draft PDPAs also provide install capacity for the project depending on location. So now I would like to talk about a specific mechanism how to consider this kind of project. As you know that recently the MOIT submit a proposal in March 2020 to consider the bidding mechanism for transitional wind and solar project. Basically to focusing on project they missing the price without the feed-in tariff price, but the development right has been confirmed for investor. And basically this is the mechanism transitional phase that consider for near term. More recently, the MOIT also released a draft official letter to call for comment for the third draft of MOIT circular on how to determine the tariff to form the basis for bidding mechanism by EVN. And basically, you see the mechanism would be need to be in line with the government of Vietnam regulation. But in terms of the bidding auctioneer, because we're talking about only the tariff to confirm under the PPA, so it seems that under MOIT proposal, EVN would be the auctioneer to run this kind of tender based on the bidding law on the procurement of goods and services, trying to use the current existing law of Vietnam. but there's some certain legal issue that need to be addressed in the premister decision before they can make the final approval. At the next step, as I mentioned, the MIT also need to prepare a draft PM decision on the mechanism, basically the competitive procurement scheme. And for this purpose, there's certain key issue like tariff or, on the term of PPA and the dispatch regulation compared to the current regulation. You need to review whether or not they are based on similar regulation on the FIT program, or there should be certain adjustment on the mechanism the government would need to consider. The timeline right now is just to be confirmed, because as you know that this is the mechanism need to be approved under premister decision. Even premister decision, they need to consider specific legal basis because the premister decision is typically is limited to very special mechanism. Otherwise, they need to revise the decree or the law. Would take more time for approval process. That's about it for a bit mechanism. Now I would like to discuss another mechanism for DPPA. So for DPPA, as we know, recently in May, the MIT published a new second draft of premister decision for a corporate synthetic deferred pilot program between the developer and consumer for comment, and actually the deadline would be the 8th of July next month. So the MIT would be planning to finalize after that to submit the final DPPA decision to promise the tentative timeline would be based on one of the meeting discussion with the draft would be tentative for Q4 2022 to launch program in early 2022-23. So it's the time frame will need to be updated based on the progress of comment and finalization process in this case. And we all know that under the corporate DPPA structure, there would be three main contracts. And co-ed developer need to sign a PPA with EVN to sell at the spot market price based on the wholesale market regulation. Separately, the consumer enter into a PPA for power supply with EVN Power Corporation to take and buy power at the currently proposed in the draft retail tariff. Now that can create some concern for consumer in terms of financial implication. And also the CFD, that it would be the most important contract, private to regulate the committed output and strike price, contract price under the contract for CFD. In terms of tentative timeline, there's some revision in the draft compared to the draft we have been discussed over last year. So in the draft, the timeline would be changed within 15 days from the date of the PPA decision coming into effect. The MIT will announce the program. There are another 15 working days for the MIT to open the portal. Actually, this is ongoing. 30 working days for the Genco and consumer developer and consumer to finalize application for registration purpose. And also the MIT have another 30 working days for selection process and determine the tentative list of qualified consumer developer. In terms of the time frame for implementation, we said 207 working days would be key for you to take note to finalize all the transaction document. In terms of total capacity for the market, the draft still remain 1 gigawatt up to 1 gigawatt for the PPA, the pilot one, the official operation after that will be to be reviewed. One of the key points you need to keep in mind is in case their total capacity exceed 1 gigawatt, then there's certain prioritized ranking consider for this draft. The first one is it is important to consider the ratio of obstacle commitment from the consumer under the CFD. So the higher, the better. The second one is the ability to achieve the COD earlier compared to other projects given the pilot program. And third would be the first come first serve basis for the registration on the electric information portal at the EDAC website. In terms of criteria for Genco developer of solar wind farm, one of the key points here is there would be additional criteria compared to previous draft. Other than the master plan approval, the recent draft add on certain additional criteria. As you can see here, one of the key points is the ability to achieve the COD within 207 working days. Another criteria is, the investment approval for the project, not just the master plan, as I mentioned earlier, and also the grid capacity, whether or not there any curtailment or limitation on capacity generation due to the grid overload. That would be also reviewed as one of the criteria. For consumer, it basically remain unchanged when we still see only industrial consumer can participate in the program, and more likely a project or facility in outside industrial park would have a higher chance to participate, given the direct contract with PPA with EVN, and also the minimum voltage level of 22 kV or more for connection to EVN grid. That would be the key point we would like to highlight in terms of registration process. It is basically straightforward to upload the soft copy and then followed by original copy submit in Hanoi to the MYT. So that's the key point I'd like to make and keep everyone updated. Thank you everyone for your kind attention. You can have any question to us separately. Otherwise, we still have a panel discussion with a lot of experts in the energy sector here in Vietnam to share with you more about their view on the energy sector and next step for Vietnam. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your presentation and setting up the stage for the panel discussion. Now, the time has come to start with the first panel discussion, which is on large scale utility solar, growth opportunity, finances, challenges, and market outlook. And to discuss this, we have in our panel with us Mr. Frank Constant from Constant Energy, Mr. Miguel Ferreira from Shirehook International, Mr. Supa Vaisayarath from Super Energy Corporation, Mr. Milan Koev from Hexagon Peak, Mr. Thomas Jacobson from Indochina Energy Partners, Mr. Thanh Hai Nguyen from Baker and McKenzie, Vietnam. The session will be led by Frank Sir from Constant Energy. Now I welcome all the panelists on the screen and I will hand it over to Frank Sir. Please take it ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Priyanshi. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. We have a distinguished number of speakers here, mainly coming from the generation side, renewable generation side, and I'll introduce them briefly to you in the next few minutes. And we have about 45 minutes to discuss the topic of the day, which is the large-scale solar power generation market situation in Vietnam. Thank you very much, Mr. Hai, for your always enlightening presentation on the current regulatory situation on Vietnam solar going forward. I think as some of our experts mentioned it earlier, it's a moving object. It's a moving object at the moment. So still, these things are still not in place yet, and a few things are still moving. So we're dealing with regulations that have yet to be put in place. So a certain level of uncertainty for new projects. But we'll talk also about existing projects that that have been in place and look at how they've been performing. Some of our speakers have experience in that, and I think that would be an interesting look into how this how the existing project have performed under the current regulations. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the different speakers, and perhaps if you don't mind starting to introduce yourself, which company you work for, and your background. And I'll start with me. So I'm Frank Constant. I'm the CEO of Constant Energy. We are a solar IPP who is doing business in Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia at the moment. And we focus on corporate PPAs. So most of our activities are around corporate PPAs, entering into long-term contract with Fortune 1000 companies in the region, and developing, building, financing, and owning and operating these projects in the long run with our own people. And I'm based in Bangkok, and I've been in Asia for 25 years in power business. I'll move on to Dr. Miguel Ferreira. Miguel, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Thank you, Frank. Happy to talk to you all the time. My name is Miguel, that you already mentioned. I work for Shire Oak International. We're an IPP, actually developer in all Southeast Asia, and basically we have a global footprint of projects. And but we are particularly active in Vietnam, in Indonesia, and now in Thailand and Malaysia. And we own a big portfolio of rooftop solar, and then we have already some investments on large scale solar. And we are pretty excited to the things that are coming. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We also have Kunsupa. Kunsupa, would you like to introduce yourself?
Okay, Sawadee Krap. I'm Thai, but I'm opposite of from. I'm in Vietnam. And, myself, background from electrical engineering, and I worked a very long time in the coal-fired, gas-fired, gas turbine in Alstom and in cement, and after that, working in oil and gas, PTT, EP, and moved to Vietnam, working with the green energy. So very proud to do green energy after with the, not green, I would say non-green energy for the long term. So very proud to do something in Vietnam with the solar energy, with the super energy, that they're really keen to do the solar plant. And now we develop the power, wind power in Vietnam, and in Thailand, they have including waste energy and water. So in total super energy now, they develop with the wind, solar, waste energy, and water supply. So we nearly complete with 4 elements. Okay, thank you, Mr. From. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kunsupa. Thank you very much for this introduction. Last but not least, we have also Thomas Jacobson. Thomas, if you don't mind introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you. We are also a regional IPP and developer. We are active in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Myanmar, and we focus purely on self-consumption, so either rooftops or, as we'll also be talking about today in Vietnam, the DPA.
Great, thank you very much. The first question I would say is we all been operating in Vietnam for a while. I think for us, Constant Energy, we are more focused on we've looked at the utility sector, but we're more focused on the corporate PPA, so smaller size type of projects, directly selling to industrial clients. I think similar to Shire Oak. But I would say one player who has been operating for utility scale solar plant and own it and develop it and operating it for several years is Super Energy from Thailand. And it would be great, Kunsupa, if I could ask you what has been your experience of developing and through the construction and operation stage of this large-scale solar in Vietnam, and perhaps compared to Thailand and the experience in other countries that Super may I have?
Okay, confirm.
Go ahead, Kun Supa.
You mean me first? Okay. For me, just to compare very easily, because of the solar in Thailand, they start to do 5 or 7 years ago, and for the super, what they did is like they have a lot of the small solar plant. I'm talking about 5 or 10 megawatt, and we have only big project, 80 megawatt in Thailand, and O&M is also totally different because if you do for the small solar plant, we use like in Thailand they use more manual or like people to maintenance, and for O&M we on outsource for the manpower to maintain and repairing of the PV solar in utility plant in Thailand. But in Vietnam, the smallest one of the solar we have 36.72 megawatt, and the rest is 50, 100, 200, 200, 150. In total, we have 836.72 megawatt. Compared to Thailand, we have around 550 megawatt, if I'm not wrong. So the way we handle in Vietnam is totally different because with the new technology, our plant in the operation is building 2.5 years until 1 year, 1.5 years. So most of the thing we equip with the new technology that's controlled by SCADA. We also try to use like the unmanned control everywhere. Like but however, with the legal of the Vietnam, we must have like a chief leader, 1 or 2 guys to control at the site, and we also aiming to implement in next year or in further like unmanned, completely unmanned if the law allow us to implement. Why we do this? First is make sure that on everything is under control, no human error. And the second thing that for the cost saving, if we don't need the manpower, need only repairing. So at the thing that we can do completely and develop more integrate with the high technology. Okay, that from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Perhaps, Kun Supa, I would have a follow-up question on your experience, since it's a very valuable experience having operated these solar plants. What area you think has been very good in Vietnam, and from your opinion as an investor in solar, and what area could be improved?
Thank you for this question. Interesting. For the area we can improve, right now I can speak very clearly about the power curtailment in some province. We also trying to minimize the cost that it happened. Like I give some example. We supply electricity to EVN. We sell in some price, okay? Like 7 cent or 8 cent or 9 cent something. But what we buy from EVN is much higher. You understand? Like consumption in our plant, we try to in future we will use the solar rooftop or something for the car parking, and then we can use the electricity from that point for the self consumption to the cost reduction. That's one thing. And for the power curtailment, in future we also plan to use battery energy storage system to keep the storage energy. Like I keep some example in Ninh whatever we produce, we cannot sell all. It will keep about 10 or 15%. That I think we should keep it in a battery energy storage system and use for the over load consumption. And on our thing, I already mentioned on the first question, if we can improve about the manpower to use the unmanned control station in our plant, we keep only the repairing of the mechanic. I think that's for thing we can improve. For the rest of the thing, we also try to change over solar plant to more green. Green in my meaning is like we allow our employee to grow some small plant in our area. They can have goat, they can have cow, they can make the plant. I can show you the picture, but I could not do it this time. In further, like my staff, they also can have chicken, they can have everything, so they can live like that. So if they're happy, so we can live with the community for another 18 or 20 years. Okay, it's my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Anything to add from our other speakers, Mr. Hai and I guess Thomas? You've been operating in Vietnam for quite some time. Anything else you'd like to add on the experience of your, perhaps Mr. Hai, your clients on the utility scale ground mount PV, or Thomas on your side from. Okay, so perhaps we'll one other topic that is, and thanks again, Kun Supa, on your insight on operating the solar plants and the ground mount solar in Vietnam. One topic that is obviously a topic that was raised by Mr. Hai earlier on his presentation is we've got a number of gigawatts of operating solar now and on the ground mount. And what will be the form that the new ground mount solar will take in Vietnam for deployment of new? We're all about, deploy. I think it's our part of our industry DNA. We want to deploy. The more solar panel we deploy on the grid, the less carbon emission are avoided. And the better our planet feels, I suppose. So I think we want to deploy. And Vietnam also has some very aggressive targets in terms of net zero. In fact, I think the net zero target of Vietnam is 2050 as a country. It's earlier than Thailand. Thailand is 2065. So Vietnam seems to be wanting to follow a trajectory faster than Thailand, which I think is quite interesting and shows a lot of ambition. Now, obviously, a lot of the carbon emitting power plants needs to be converted to renewable to achieve that, and deploying a lot of gigawatts of additional renewable plant need to be deployed. One way, as following Mr. I's presentation, to deploy is through the DPPA, which is the most likely way to deploy in the short term. DPPA is go for direct PPA. And this has been a program that has been developed together with the Vietnamese authorities for the last at least 2 or 3 years, and seems to take some time to develop. Not the first time an ambitious program like this takes time to develop in Vietnam or elsewhere. So hopefully the result will be quite positive for the sector. And I'd like to ask Thomas if he can give us a bit more perspective on the DPPA and what is coming, maybe perhaps taking into some of the information from Mr. I and his own experience.
Okay, thank you for that, Frank. As I said in the brief introduction, we only do self-consumption and corporate PPA, so that's why from day one, the direct power purchasing agreement pilot program was very interesting to us. We've been part of the working group since 2018, and we're actually coming up to the 5-year anniversary of the official launch of the pilot program as a project. Which was in October 2017, where, believe it or not, Donald Trump, of all people, was part of launching it in connection with the APEC meeting in Da Nang in Vietnam. But so we're actually 5 years down the road now. The reason why it is interesting to discuss DPPA today is because it is one of the options for continuing large-scale utility ground-mounted, primarily in principle also floating, but primarily ground-mounted solar deployment. As you saw from the initial presentation from Mr. Hai, the current drafts of the PDP do not envision very much new renewable energy to be deployed, regardless of whether that is ground-mounted solar, onshore, nearshore wind. It not very much is envisioned of new projects to be deployed until 2030. And that's, of course, on the background of the overwhelming success of the feed-in tariffs. Too much success could perhaps be said today. So EVN right now is trying to figure out how can we keep on moving towards the pathway to net zero while not over congesting the grid, overburdening the financial systems, giving too much financial responsibility on EVN, because EVN currently has around $150 billion of renewable energy PPA signed. That's basically all power that is produced at higher prices than EVN can sell at legally, and produced at times and places where EVN does not necessarily need the power. So when you put all of that together, obviously it's very difficult for EVN to move forward. One of the options is, however, the direct power purchasing agreement that has the advantage for EVN that it works over the wholesale market, which means that from EVN's point of view, they will never be in the situation that they will be buying power at too high of a cost compared to the sales price, compared to the retail price. That makes the DPPA very attractive for EVN compared to the feed-in tariff schemes, which were forced upon EVN. And that's also why they are curtailing, they are asking for extra clarifications of whether all projects are legal, etc., etc., etc. They're making a lot of problems today because they, to some extent, felt that they were being forced to enter into feed-in tariff programs. The DPPA works relatively simply by EVN buying the power at wholesale market prices, which gives them good security. That also gives good security for the generator, not on the pricing, but on the fact that EVN will most likely buy all the power that they can get from those sort of plants, because that power will always be cheaper, presumably always be cheaper than the feed-in tariff programs. So that means that EVN actually has an incentive to evacuate the power generated under DPPA. It is, however, from a generator's point of view, at an unknown price, which is not very attractive. From the customer side, they will still be buying at wholesale market price, but they can fix those, they will still be buying at retail prices, but they can fix those retail prices at current retail prices. And that means that any increases in future retail prices, those will not be borne by the off-taker, by the factory. So there's also an incentive for the factory. So the overall conclusion for the DPPA is that even in version 2, which is less attractive from the generator point of view than version 1, which we got back in 2019. So this is the first movement forward in 2.5 to 3 years we have on the DPPA. That it can be more attractive for the generator, but it depends very much on how the contract for difference is constructed. And obviously, the contract for difference cannot be constructed in a way that it is wildly uninteresting for the off-taker, because then the off-taker will choose alternatives, and that could be continue buying normal power from EVN and then making some form of offsets, for example, through purchase of RECs. That is not best in class from an off-taker point of view, but it is, after all, a solution. So it really comes down to how attractive can the contract for difference be made, and that is a bilateral negotiation on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you. Thank you, Thomas. Miguel, anything you would like to add to that? Maybe I think Thomas gave us a perspective on the regulation and also from the generator point of view. Perhaps anything you'd like to add from the point of view of the market you know well, which is the consumers, the factories?
Yeah, thank you, Frank. Thank you, Thomas. I think well, we have been lucky to have discussed this a little bit recently, and the reality is that the way things are looking now, these off-takers that are consumed, that are, let's say, corporate consumers, have a lot of options that may hinder a little bit the deployment of the PPA policy. And I refer that right now an off-taker like with certain weight has access to the spot market, has access to the self-generation and storage and so on. And what happens is that those tariffs that are available to them are the reference they will use for this contract for difference. And then the strike price of the current investments, in the way, and maybe Kunsupa also can confirm, the strike price that can be generated out of these investments are still quite high compared to what the spot market in those sites are. This is something that will structure this negotiation because, and that's why the waiting for the regulation is kind of inevitable, kind of course of action, because that will set directly what is the impact that for the off-taker and the generator, the GenCo, the generator will have the final closing of those deals. Right now, I have seen generators that can produce around probably 4 or 5 cents per kilowatt. I have seen some generators that can produce on wind about 6 to 7 cents per kilowatt. And you can see that the consumer has access to 3.5 cents or 4 cents in the spot market as well for those kilowatts. So this is an interesting situation because it's like the way the market is set right now without the regulation. But right now is that an off-taker will have to pay a premium to use this green electricity. So, and that's while some off-takers will do for commitment, commercially it's not quite viable. So I was wondering, I don't know, Frank and Thomas, Kunsupa, Mr. Tan, if you guys have this type of overview on what is the implication of this difference in the available and for any off-taker, basically.
Now, what we've seen is perhaps some experience. Some of our clients, we have clients in Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam right now, and some clients of our clients in Malaysia, Tenaga actually offered a green tariff end of last year, which was 10% higher than the industrial tariff, and they had a 400 megawatt allocation, and basically they got in a few weeks it was taken up by the industries. Mainly, international companies who had clear, aggressive target for decarbonization. So 400 megawatt was taken up. It was not long-term commitments. It was not long-term PPAs, but it was a couple of years, I think, or 2 or 3 years. Yes. And it was 10% more expensive than grid. So there is appetite by some large customers to go green, even if they have to pay a premium.
Yes, and this is the whole point. While these big corporations, because I can tell you, I have 2 or 3 of my clients that will be able probably to take the whole pilot capacity of 1,000 megawatt, right? Then the real, let's say the normal corporate market, these corporate off-takers that want to have that as well, are in a strong disadvantage because the tariff is the retail tariff is coming to a point where it's quite stable in general terms. So there is a consideration for the economic attractive to go into a green mode in this sense. So there is something going on. I don't know if anyone else has this type of feeling that there is it's like we're competing against ourselves, right? Because we need to generate at a certain cost, and we have to sell at a certain cost where is the off-takers have also some considerations. Except I agree with you, Frank, if they are actually heavy users in a global corporate scale, because they have benefits that are a bit offset with and leverage across all the countries. But national consumer will actually have this type of considerations on the different tariff.
And that's one of the reasons why from the very beginning we put into the DPPA that the consumers that would be able to apply, that they would need to already have internationally recognized commitments, not internal commitments, but for example, but not necessarily RE100. But that also leads some other things down the road, that then there are some requirements what is considered acceptable under RE100, for example. But that was why that was done initially when we started this up in 2018 and had the first round of consumers in that. I mean, that there are some of them that have 80 factories in Vietnam. And some of the individual factories, they can easily take, they're much bigger than they're even allowed to be in the DPPA. So you would have to divide them up or give them different connection points or different transformers.
Perhaps another point I would like to add is on this DPPA is that yes, today maybe they can get, some of the industry can get spot price at 3 cents or 4 cents, but indeed this is temporary and it's a spot. In the current, we are moving to a new world now, which with high inflation, for the next few years. So we're experiencing inflation that we've never seen before globally, and no country will be immune to that. And the Miguel coming from Venezuela, you'll be sensitive to the impact that inflation can have and how much it can be impact on the industry. Here, we are seeing large inflation in electricity prices in all the countries in Southeast Asia. Thailand has increased power prices by 20% since the beginning of the year. Malaysia has increased by 10%. Singapore, not even talking about Singapore, I think probably in the Vietnam is one of the only countries that they have not increased industrial prices. That I don't think that's sustainable actually for EVN, and EVN will have to find money somewhere, and it has to find money somewhere. So the benefit of the DPPA is that the client is basically able to lock in their price fixed. Typically, it could be fixed for the next 15 to 20 years, basically, and allows them an edge and avoid the potentially spike in the power prices going forward. Especially as the fuel mix of Vietnam is looking more potentially to have more gas and therefore have higher marginal price per kilowatt hour in the future than it has today. Sorry to interrupt. I just saw that one of our speakers just came in, Milan, who actually was. I'd like to briefly see if he can speak. He's just joined the session, I think, a few minutes after we started. I don't know if Milan, you can hear us, but feel free to jump in. Hi,
Frank. I'm here. I just have some issues with the video.
Okay. Maybe Milan, perhaps you want to introduce yourself, and I don't know if you have any comments on the DPPA in addition to what our panelists commented on.
Yeah, I missed probably the most part of the conversation, but I think one thing is clear, and is that the government is really not too eager to promote solar, and the consequence of this approach will be impactful for every single program that is running in the government, whether this is DPPA or the upcoming auctions or the rooftop projects. Everything will be impacted by the spirit of solar is too much, and I guess this is the consequence of becoming the victims of our own success. Our own meaning all the companies that are involved in developing solar in Vietnam. But I guess on DPPA particularly, it's really a battle that is ongoing because we still have a lot of those corporates that are really pushing forward to changes in the current draft. I'm not sure how far those lobbying activities will go, but there is definitely going to be um, someone in the government that has to pay a little bit closer attention to what these guys say, because those are some of the biggest employers of the country. So it's not irrelevant what they want and what they say. So again, let's see how it goes. But again, the clear message is that the government doesn't really like solar right now.
Yeah, I'd say that. How do you view the Prime Minister just commented on the PDP 8 draft, right? So to kind of have another look, as Mr. Hai explained earlier on, it's kind of suggesting that no increase in solar between now and 2030 was not acceptable. So wouldn't you, and perhaps I would talk to Thomas, who are on the ground, and Mr. Hai, who have been on the ground for many years. Would you say that, would you share Milan's view that the government is not so much in favor of solar, or given the Prime Minister's position recently, you would tone down that view?
Well, there's no doubt that before the PDP-8 gets approved, which is now in its third or fourth iteration and a year and a half at least the date, then there needs to come a resolution on the overbuild on wind and solar, how it happened, etc. And that's obviously why all 349 renewable energy projects in the PDP 7, they have been asked to clarify the legality of their operations, so to speak. So that process has to go through first, and that's also why we as an IPP chose never ever to sell electricity to EVN, because at some time this overbill would come and there would be a problem. So I think that has to be allowed to go through, and that is happening now. With that said, we have always been told that any projects that are, and that's been told by MOIT, any projects that are self-consumption under decision 13, meaning below the 1.25 megawatt peak, so that EVN can control them, that they will continue to be grandfathered in for the future. And they will not count against any number that it says in the PDP-8. So that the rooftop that is mentioned in PDP-8 will be the rooftop with PPAs to EVN. And we think that is fair as long as they are the projects that are under the 1.25, so that EVN can control it. Whereas if it is projects that are 10 megawatts on a factory, then EVN still has to stand by with all of the generation capacity in case a big black cloud comes over that factory. And that's obviously not fair that they are to do that free of charge, that they go from being the monopoly supplier of power to being the provider of last resort. It is obviously not fair that they do that completely for free. And therefore, I think that once EVN and MOIT is just allowed to work through this, then there will come a more balanced view from MOIT. But right now, it would be very difficult for them to just say, okay, let's go loose on soda again, because last time the free market simply got away. So give them a chance to just catch everything up and make sure that everything is on the same page.
Yeah, I just want to add from a legal perspective, based on my involvement in a number of technical review projects. As you know, in Vietnam right now, there are a lot of issues the government need to consider how to develop the energy market, not just for promoting the renewable energy or solar, but also need to consider, the transmission line availability, how to address existing procurement issue and grid overload for certain location, and also, the new trend for COP26 commitment, and also, the northern part power demand will be increased in the next 5 years. There are a number of issues like that the government need to consider very carefully. EV are also supported to, buy power, but there's a number of issues they also need to consider from their end. Um, right now, the legal framework of Vietnam is something not, ready to, for example, bidding law, the investment law. We used to talk about how to run a tender, for example, under auction mechanism, whether MYT or the Provide or event, how to involve the different stakeholder in the bidding process. That is something, the law need to be adjusted to reflect the new arrangement, because for greenfield investment, there may be not just the better the tariff, but also development right. But at least, as you can see here, the comment from the Prime Minister focusing on the development right and asking for the status of project. So there should be some continued conversation to clarify the status of project. And you know that for a project under PDP 7 revised, the rule for approving the PDP 7 revised project is different from PDPA. PDPA, they will not include the name of the project, but as you may know from the PDP 7 revised, is based on the application from the investor submit to the province review, pre-FS works for work to MYT for review, and certain ministry comment consolidate to Prime Minister for final approval. So there's some basis. Some basis from the development right has been tied. So it is not in the easy way to make a decision. It is just a matter of time, and as a matter of progress of development and location specific, where would be the location, the EVN need the power to supply to ensure that energy security would be met by the nation. So there are a lot of issues like that. So they obviously Vietnam have some short-term difficulty how to handle various issues like that, but in the long term, I see consistency from the overall policy that at least based on Resolution 55, Vietnam continue to support renewable energy, and obviously Thomas mentioned on-site self-consumption is something continue to be promoted by the regulation and also the draft PDPA, because at the end of the day, the key point here is consumer should be provided with the sufficient power for social and economic development in Vietnam going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Hai. Yes. Maybe one follow-up question on this is, you work for one of the global legal powerhouse, and obviously many banks coming to you for advice on infrastructure in Vietnam. How is the banks reacting? Now in the solar utility scale, banks, foreign or local banks have financed the projects, but foreign banks have not financed the project on non-recourse basis. And obviously, bank financing is crucial in power. If you don't have the banks with you in power, you don't go very far. So, how do you? I would say it's fair to say that foreign banks have not been so active in solar deployment in Vietnam in terms of utility scale based on the EV and PPA for reason well known. including the PPA, some issue with the PPA with EVN. How do you view how do you feel is the attitude of the international banks with regard to the latest DPPA announcements? You think they're going to come and finance?
From my observation, I'm not a bank, but from my observation in the market and involvement of financing deal in the region in Vietnam, I see a trend that particularly for CNI rooftop solar, for example, lender want to provide financing, particularly for offshore lender. They prefer to provide financing on a portfolio basis rather than one-on-one rooftop solar small scale basis to have a risk mitigation at a more portfolio level. Because as you know that under regulation of Vietnam, the refinancing from onshore loan to offshore loan have some restriction under the State Bank of Vietnam. So that's why they consider portfolio financing. Obviously, the risk allocation under corporate PPA and EVN PPA would be different. In the corporate PPA structure, as you know that there's certain flexibility for a corporate power consumer and developer to agree to mitigate and manage the risk at the balance level, and maybe sponsor can have a room for receive some comment from lender to address some of the issue in the corporate PPA. I would say that from a lender point of view, the minimum protection like termination payment would be key from a lender perspective. But obviously, curtailment would be relevant for both sponsor and lender. I think for large-scale solar farm, obviously, right now it's kind of a bit difficult for project financing on a non-recourse basis, given the bankable issue like curtailment and termination that not fully addressed. And some clarity has yet to be fully addressed. So, non-recourse difficult, but limited recourse with certain level of reasonable sponsor support continue to be available in Vietnam for solar farm or wind farm project financing. So I believe that there should be certain reasonable level of comfort for negotiation on a project by project basis. To make it feasible in Vietnam.
Thank you, Mr. Han. Thank you.
If I may add something, I think thank you, Tan, because this is a very, very interesting point. I think there are two things. Number one, I agree with you, with Thomas, and with Frank that I think the government, in the sense of their clarity of what they want to achieve, I think they are clear. They want to do what they want to do. Now, the question is, what the brain thinks and what the hands do might not be so coordinated yet. So I think it's very difficult to actually apply the vision that actually exists. I think the vision is quite consistent. Now, there is the economic part and so on, but it is the technical part, because then when we go back to the large scale solar supply, you can see then we have the actual network, the transport of this energy around. And this is where self-consumption and the large scale is a part of a system where the regulation has to be stable around both. Because if you put yourself in the place of EVN, the question is, what do you want? Which energy do you want transiting over your grid, right? Your distribution system. And the question is, here's where the self-consumption power actually releases the grid from energy, from a space that will be used by the large scale to fulfill the rest of this. So there is a balance that has to be achieved. And then I understand that I agree with Mr. Tan that eventually this will come to a more stable position, because I think that the great difficulty right now is not so much the lack of revenue by EVN, because this revenue they are getting from all the systems that are coming in. The challenge is how to handle the variations on the grid, and that's actually quite difficult. We have been working with EVN, training in how to manage and networking, presenting models of how different countries work on managing the grid and so on. But I think this is the main challenge they actually have to be able to comply with the high level vision. You might disagree, but it's something to think about. And I don't know if you guys have a different point of view on this one.
But that's exactly why they put the 1.25 megawatt peak into Decision 13. That anyone not complying with that would then have to be on the power development plan, and anybody who is neither are going to have a major problem. So that's what a lot of this evaluation, where all 349 projects, renewable energy projects that are on the power development plan, have been asked to clarify their legal status.
James, thank you for this insightful plan. She wants to maybe open up the floor for Q&A. I see we got a few questions from the audience.
Yeah, I would request all the audience to please post their questions in the Q&A box. We have 2 questions. By the time we can answer that, Frank sir, is that okay for you?
Sure. Let me take a look at the question first, perhaps. I only see one question from Mr. Kumar, right? Is there any other one question that you?
So there's one more question. Would you like to take this up first?
Yeah.
The one which I've displayed on the screen?
Okay, yeah. So how is the government supporting the renewable industry at policy and industry level? Well, I would say that there's been subsidies already in the solar sector and in the wind sector by the government to start the sector. As a result, 20 gigawatts of solar were built in the last 3 years, and I think over 5 gigawatts of wind were built last year. So that's the first way the government is supporting the sector. In terms of other renewable program, we talked about the DPPA, which is not supposed to be a subsidy. It's supposed to be a market mechanism to enable renewable to be deployed on the generation side, and for clients to be able to green their power supply on the electricity side. Is there any other program that you can think of, renewable program policy and industrial levels that are outside of that? And we didn't talk much about feed-in tariffs or the next round of feed-in tariff or reserve or reverse auction, whichever they decide to do. But maybe who want to take this up?
Yeah, I can supplement Franz on that point. So basically, the government of Vietnam have several mechanisms to support renewable energy. For grid-connected project, as Franz mentioned, solar for this kind of 6.5 gigawatt, they will be considered by certain mechanism as we discussed, auction or DPPA. But after that, for long-term investment, on-site project, on-site for solar farm or floating solar can be considered on a case by case. And for rooftop solar, as we discussed, the government of Vietnam working on the tariff mechanism, how to determine the annual tariff, determine the rule for determine the price for new regulation for tariff for Vietnam, not just for renewable, but also conventional all kinds of technology. Right now, Vietnam have been planning to amend a number of law like electricity law and new decree, and also the regulation in the coming time. There can be a more comprehensive law on renewable energy will be considered to study and prepare and create a more sustainable regulation for Vietnam. Not just one-on-one premise decision, but can be more comprehensive degree of law on renewable energy will be considered. And obviously for self-consumption not just solar and wind, but also biomass, other technology, um, can be also considered to study for Vietnam. And for renewable energy or offshore wind, we also need to be studied. We are now study on the how to use PV law framework for large scale offshore wind in Vietnam. That can be one of the options need to be considered for large scale offshore wind. This year, 10 years when we have a 7 gigawatt installed capacity to be considered by 2030. So basically, Vietnam government consider a number of mechanisms for different stakeholders to doing business in Vietnam. The key point here is depending on your strategy, you need to identify realistic business opportunity based on your time frame in Vietnam when you have a limited time. You need to do business in the next 2 or 3 years. What you need to do, like on-site top solar, can be similar to Thomas mentioned. That can be one option. DPPA in like 1 to 2 3 years can also be an option for utility scale project.
Thank you, Mr. Hai.
Thank you so much. We have 2 more questions. Frank, sir, you can take one of them since we are running out of time.
Okay, Priyansh, if you can show me the screen with the questions, the different questions. Okay, thank you.
Maybe Milan sir can take this up. Milan sir, you would like to take this question?
Yeah, sure. The key word here is realistically. What is your opinion realistically on the future of CNI market? Is the government looking to abandon solar and push other renewables? Clearly not a black and white answer. Sure. I heard opinions here that the government is still trying to promote CNI solar, which I beg to disagree with, because that's absolutely not the case. Only those who are involved in development and execution of rooftop projects know that there is obstacles all along the way, and maybe on paper it looks perfect, but in reality it's totally different. CNI market became self-consumption behind the meter market, and the adoption of it was so significant and fast that right now we're talking about secondary market, more or less operational portfolios that are being traded, projects that have been stranded or are not perfect technically, legally, or financially. So let's say that basically the key portion of the rooftop market with the highest segment of it has already been finished, and I think going forward we're gonna still see a couple of 100 megawatt of projects on an annual basis, but there is absolutely not going to be any growth of it. But anyone else has a different opinion, please share.
Yeah, well, we think that there's still lots of market out there. A lot of what was built in 2019 and 20 were the ones that could not self-consume fully and therefore needed the split PPAs, and they're the ones having trouble with their EVN now. So that's a major thing. We've been able to get connections as late as November 2021. So it is still possible to get connections, but as I said, since January 2021, it has been crystal clear that at some time there would have to be a reckoning of the projects that were being built and had been built. Were they compliant to Decision 13? Had they complied with the regulations as to in which order you're to do things, in which order you're to get which permits? And the ones who have not gotten those will be in serious trouble. The ones who have gotten those will be able to continue. So that's our take on it. But it's clear that because of 20 gigawatts of solar in general in Vietnam, that obviously EVN is scared by the fact that the market had such great success.
Miguel, I'm sure you want to add something on this.
Sure. Thank you, Frank. I agree with both Jacob and Millet. I think the thing is, it's not if the because the question is the government really looking to abandon or not? I don't believe so. I actually stick a little bit to my previous comment where I believe the vision is clear, but I don't believe the execution is really set for EVN and especially in MOIT, how to prevent abuse, let's say, of the system versus very legitimate corporate users that having all the right to put whatever they want on the roof, right? So there is a lack of clarity, and I agree on that one. But I cannot see how, with the extra 6,000 megawatts per year being added into the Vietnam electrical landscape, with 53% is CNI. I cannot see, even with all the problems of the PPA, how can green energy take over to the level of the regulation 55 after the COP26 pledge by the Prime Minister. So there is I agree. Right now, I don't think the clarity on the operational side, and as you say, there are a lot of obstacles and everything, but this is a market in evolution, and I think the direction is clear now. It's a question is how much developers like us are able to be sustainable during the waiting period and the evolution period. Can we really continue in a good way? So I think in our case, so we feel okay, but it's not black and white, as you say. I think so.
Thank you, gentlemen. I think we're coming to the end of our panel. I would like to thank all our speakers to participate, and the audience for their questions. And I think you can see that as we said, this is a moving target on the large scale new project of solar ground mounted. I think on CNI there's still some movement and some development with some challenges on the regulations. That's, I think, some of the conclusion we see, and I think the ball is in the court of the government, and the Prime Minister intervention on the PDP-8 is being watched, and to see which direction Vietnam will take on especially on solar and wind in terms of finalization of PDP-8 in the next few months. I'll hand over to Pranchi, thanking the panelists for their participation.
Thank you so much, all our esteemed panelists, for this wonderful session, and special thanks to Frank sir for superbly managing the session. You were absolutely outstanding. Thanks for such a terrific and very professional example you set as a moderator. It was a pleasure to have you all in this well-planned panel discussion. Thanks a lot, everyone. See you soon for our future events. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. For the audience, the show is
Bye-bye.
not over yet. We will be coming back in next 5 minutes with our second panel discussion. So please hold on your seats, and we will be back soon. Thank you so much, audience and the panelists. Thank you.